Money buys power, but it never buys true loyalty. When a ruthless underworld king faked a catastrophic bankruptcy to test his glamorous fiancée, he expected a broken heart. He didn't expect his invisible overweight maid to uncover a bloody, sinister conspiracy that would burn his entire criminal empire to ashes. Vincenzo Costa was a man who trusted numbers, but never people. At 38, he sat at the apex of the city's underworld, cloaking a brutal syndicate behind the polished glass and steel of Costa Global Logistics. His legitimate business moved freight across the Atlantic. His shadow empire moved narcotics weapons and untraceable cash. Vincenzo lived his life with the cold, calculating precision of a Swiss watch. He wore bespoke Brioni suits that hid the Kevlar vest beneath, drove a matte black Aston Martin DBS, and resided in a sprawling 30-room fortress in the hills, heavily guarded and equipped with state-of-the-art security systems. Yet for all his power, a gnawing paranoia had taken root in his mind. It centered on Evelyn Kensington. Evelyn was a breathtaking socialite, a woman whose beauty could stop traffic on Fifth Avenue. She possessed porcelain skin, cascading blonde hair, and eyes the color of pale sapphires. She was a fixture at charity galas, frequently photographed, stepping out of the Plaza Hotel, dripping in diamonds, or dining at Le Bernardin. Vincenzo had proposed to her with a flawless 8-carat Graf diamond ring 6 months ago. She was the perfect Mafia wife, poised, elegant, and seemingly devoted. But Vincenzo didn't become the boss by ignoring his gut. Recently, Evelyn's affection felt rehearsed. The way she smiled when he handed her his black American Express Centurion card seemed far more genuine than the way she kissed him when he returned home from a business trip with bruised knuckles. He needed to know if she loved Vincenzo the man or Vincenzo the bank. To find out, he engineered the ultimate test. It took weeks of meticulous planning with his offshore fixers in the Cayman Islands. He temporarily transferred his liquid assets into blind trusts in Zurich under shell corporations. He had his top hackers manipulate the banking apps on his own phone to show negative balances. He even paid a corrupt mid-level contact at the FBI to orchestrate a flashy, but ultimately hollow, raid on his secondary warehouse. On a rainy Tuesday evening, Vincenzo returned to his mansion, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled, playing the role of a broken man. Evelyn was in the grand parlor, sipping a glass of Dom Perignon, idly flipping through a copy of Vogue. The fireplace crackled, casting a warm glow over the imported Italian marble floors. "Pack your bags," Vincenzo said, his voice trembling with manufactured panic. He poured himself 3 fingers of Macallan 25 and downed it in one gulp. "We have to leave. Tonight." Evelyn lowered her magazine, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows knitting together. "Vincenzo, darling, what are you talking about? We have the Met Gala committee dinner tomorrow." "There is no dinner, Evelyn. There is no money." Vincenzo choked out, running a hand through his dark hair. "The feds raided the Brooklyn docks. They seized the offshore accounts. Goldman Sachs just dumped my entire legitimate portfolio to distance themselves. I'm ruined. I have maybe 10,000 in a duffel bag, and we need to disappear to Mexico before the indictments drop." Evelyn sat frozen. For a fleeting second, the mask slipped. The adoring, sweet fiancée vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stranger. Her sapphire eyes darted around the opulent room, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the Picasso original on the wall, the sheer extravagance she was being asked to abandon. "Bankrupt," she whispered the word, tasting like poison on her tongue. "What do you mean, bankrupt? What about the trust in Geneva?" "Frozen." Vincenzo lied, effortlessly observing her every micro-expression. "It's all gone, Evelyn. But I have you. We can start over. A quiet life." He reached for her hand, but she instinctively pulled it back, a gesture so swift it felt like a physical blow. She quickly recovered, forcing a tight, panicked smile. "Of course, Vincenzo. Just give me a moment to pack. I need to gather my thoughts." As Evelyn hurried up the grand staircase, Vincenzo poured another drink. His heart felt heavy, a dull ache settling in his chest. His suspicions were proving true. She wasn't running with him. She was running from him. But what Vincenzo didn't know was that the real danger in his house wasn't the gold-digging fiancée upstairs. The real danger was something much darker, a secret currently being unearthed by the one person in the mansion nobody ever noticed. Beatrice Higgins was invisible. At 250 pounds, Beatrice moved with a heavy, deliberate slowness that the elite inhabitants of the Costa estate mistook for stupidity. She was the head maid, a woman in her late 40s, with a kind, round face, tired brown eyes, and knees that constantly ached from kneeling on imported marble floors. Her uniform was always immaculately ironed, but it strained at the seams, because she was fat, soft-spoken, and rarely made eye contact. The household treated her like a piece of the furniture, a very large, very quiet piece of furniture. They didn't realize that Beatrice heard everything. When you are invisible, people don't lower their voices when you enter a room. They leave their diaries open. They make illicit phone calls while you are scrubbing the bathtub just inches away. Beatrice was in the master suite's walk-in closet, meticulously sorting Vincenzo's silk ties, when Evelyn burst into the bedroom. Beatrice immediately shrank back into the shadows of the expansive, cedar-lined wardrobe, holding her breath, her chest rising and falling heavily. Evelyn didn't start packing. Instead, she bolted the bedroom door, retrieved a burner phone hidden inside a hollowed-out Chanel shoebox, and dialed a number. "Adrian, it's happening," Evelyn hissed into the phone, her voice entirely devoid of the panic she had shown Vincenzo downstairs. Beatrice frowned in the darkness. Adrian. Adrian Rossi was the underboss of the rival Moretti syndicate. He was a ruthless, ambitious man who had been trying to usurp Vincenzo's territory for years. "Yes, he just told me he's bankrupt," Evelyn continued, pacing the thick Persian rug. "He's pathetic. He's begging me to go to Mexico with him. But here is the thing. He's lying." In the closet, Beatrice clamped a hand over her mouth. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I know he's lying." Evelyn laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Your mole in his IT department confirmed it. The offshore accounts aren't frozen. They've been temporarily transferred to a blind trust. He's testing me. The arrogant bastard thinks he's playing a game of chess." There was a pause as Evelyn listened to the voice on the other end. "No, I'm not leaving him," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "If I leave now, I get nothing. If I stay, I pass his little test, and he marries me. But we don't have to wait that long. The digital transfer requires a dual signature, biometric release if anything happens to him, before the assets return to the primary account. If he dies while the money is in the blind trust as his legally designated proxy, I gain total control." Beatrice's wide eyes watered as the sheer weight of the betrayal washed over her. Evelyn wasn't just a gold digger. She was a black widow. "I've been upping the dosage of the thallium in his nightly espresso, just like you said," Evelyn murmured. "He's been complaining of migraines and numbness in his hands all week. His doctor thinks it's stress. Tonight I'll give him the final dose, a massive heart attack brought on by the stress of his bankruptcy. It's poetic, really. We walk away with $80 million in untraceable liquid cash, and your family takes over the docks." Beatrice's mind raced. Thallium. It was a heavy metal, highly toxic, tasteless and odorless. It was known as the poisoner's poison, because it mimicked natural illness. Beatrice had noticed Vincenzo looking pale, rubbing his temples, his normally sharp eyes clouded with fatigue. She had thought it was the burden of his empire. Evelyn hung up the phone and walked over to her vanity mirror. She opened a small velvet jewelry box. Inside, instead of a necklace, lay a small glass vial filled with a clear liquid. Evelyn slipped the vial into the pocket of her silk robe and left the room, her heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. For a long moment, Beatrice couldn't move. Her legs felt like lead. She was just a maid, a fat, tired woman who sent half her paycheck to a nursing home in Queens for her mother. If she crossed Evelyn Kensington or the Moretti family, they wouldn't just fire her, they would bury her under a new concrete overpass on the I-95. Mind your business, Bea, she told herself. Just do your job and go home. But then Beatrice thought about Vincenzo. Yes, he was a mafia boss. Yes, he was a criminal. But to her, he was the only employer who had ever treated her with dignity. 2 years ago, when Beatrice had suffered a severe asthma attack in the kitchen, it wasn't the other staff who helped her. It was Vincenzo Costa himself. He had carried her heavy frame to his own car, driven her to Mount Sinai Hospital, and paid her medical bills in full. He had never mentioned it again, but Beatrice never forgot. She took a deep, trembling breath, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. She couldn't let him die. Moving faster than she had in years, Beatrice squeezed out of the closet. She had to find the proof. She couldn't just walk up to a paranoid, ruthless mafia don and tell him his fiancée was an assassin without evidence. He would think she was insane. Beatrice slipped out of the master suite and crept down the back servants' stairs. The mansion was eerily quiet. Vincenzo had dismissed most of his guards to the perimeter to sell the illusion of his downfall. She made her way to the massive commercial-grade kitchen. Evelyn was already there. Beatrice hid behind the heavy swinging doors of the walk-in pantry, peering through the crack. Evelyn was standing by the state-of-the-art Miele espresso machine. The rich, dark scent of Cuban coffee filled the air. With steady, manicured hands, Evelyn poured the espresso into Vincenzo's favorite black ceramic mug. Then she reached into her robe, pulled out the glass vial, and uncorked it. She emptied the entire contents into the steaming liquid and stirred it gently with a silver spoon. "For richer or poorer, darling," Evelyn whispered to herself, a wicked smile playing on her lips. She placed the mug on a silver tray and turned to leave the kitchen. Beatrice knew she had only seconds. As soon as Evelyn pushed through the dining room doors, Beatrice lunged out of the pantry. Despite her size, adrenaline fueled her movements. She reached the trash can where Evelyn had discarded the empty glass vial. She dug through the coffee grounds and discarded lemon rinds, her fingers frantically searching. Got it. Her fingers closed around the tiny glass tube. A few drops of the clear, deadly liquid remained at the bottom. She shoved the vial deep into the pocket of her apron, just as the kitchen door swung open again. It was Vincenzo. He looked exhausted, his eyes dark and sunken. He stared at Beatrice, slightly startled by her flushed face and heavy panting. "Beatrice, what are you doing in here so late?" he asked, his voice rough. I was just cleaning up Mr. Costa." She stammered, her heart threatening to beat out of her chest. She could feel the vial burning against her thigh. Vincenzo sighed, running a hand over his face. "Go home, Beatrice. Take a few days off. Things are complicated right now." Beatrice looked at the man who had saved her life. He was walking directly into a trap. He was going to the parlor to drink his coffee and wait for a fiancée who would watch him suffocate. "Mr. Costa," Beatrice said, her voice surprisingly steady. The invisible maid was stepping into the light. I wouldn't drink the coffee Miss Kensington just brought you. Vincenzo froze. His dark eyes narrowed instantly, shifting from a tired businessman to a lethal predator. Excuse me. Beatrice reached into her apron and pulled out the glass vial. She held it out to him in her trembling, plump hand. Your bankruptcy was a test for her, Beatrice said, quietly, holding his piercing gaze. But she's testing you too. And if you drink that espresso, Mr. Costa, she's going to inherit everything. Vincenzo stared at the vial, the pieces of the puzzle violently snapping together in his mind. The silence in the kitchen grew deafening heavy with the promise of blood. Vincenzo Costa did not gasp. He did not shout. The training of a lifetime in the brutal underworld kicked in, instantly turning his veins to ice. He took the tiny glass vial from Beatrice's trembling, plump fingers and held it up to the harsh fluorescent lights of the kitchen. Thallium, Vincenzo murmured, his voice deadly quiet. He recognized the slight oily residue at the glass's bottom. It was a coward's weapon, favored by those too weak to look their enemies in the eye and pull a trigger. He slowly lowered his gaze to Beatrice. She stood before him, her heavy chest heaving under her starched white uniform, her hands tightly clasped together to hide their shaking. She expected him to explode, to pull the silver Kimber 1911 concealed beneath his suit jacket and storm into the parlor. Instead, Vincenzo pulled out his encrypted phone. He sent a single one-character text message to his head of security. Then he looked back at the maid. Tell me exactly what you heard, Beatrice. Vincenzo commanded, his tone devoid of its usual polished charm. Leave nothing out, every word. Beatrice swallowed hard. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the silent kitchen it echoed like thunder. She was in your closet, Mr. Costa, on a burner phone hidden in a shoebox. She was talking to a man named Adrian. She said... Beatrice paused, tears welling in her tired brown eyes. She said she knew the bankruptcy was a test. She knew about the blind trusts. She said she was going to give you a final dose tonight to trigger a heart attack so she could take over as your proxy. At the name Adrian, a dark, violent shadow crossed Vincenzo's face. Adrian Rossi, the Moretti Syndicate's most ambitious dog. Rossi had been chipping away at Vincenzo's territory in the Diamond District for months, but Vincenzo had never suspected he had managed to place a viper directly in his bed. Why are you telling me this, Beatrice? Vincenzo asked, stepping closer. You could have walked out the back door. If Evelyn or Rossi found out, you knew they would kill you. Why risk your life for a man you just clean up after? Beatrice looked down at her scuffed, black orthopedic shoes. Because 2 years ago, when I couldn't breathe, you didn't look at me like I was just a fat, invisible woman who scrubs the floors, she said softly. You carried me to your car. You paid for my hospital stay. You saved my life, Mr. Costa. I wasn't going to let her take yours. For the first time in perhaps a decade, Vincenzo felt a genuine crack in his armor. In a world where loyalty was bought with blood or millions of dollars, this woman who had absolutely nothing was offering hers for free. He slipped the vial into his breast pocket. The exhausted, defeated businessman vanished. The Mafia boss returned his posture, straightening his eyes, burning with a cold, calculating fire. Beatrice, Vincenzo said, placing a firm, reassuring hand on her thick shoulder. I need you to go to the security room in the basement. Lock the steel door from the inside. Do not open it for anyone but me. Do you understand? She nodded vigorously. What are you going to do? I am going to pass my fiancée's test, Vincenzo said, a terrifying smile curving on his lips. Vincenzo pushed through the swinging doors and walked down the long, dimly lit corridor toward the grand parlor. His mind moved like a supercomputer, recalculating his entire strategy. He had wanted to know if Evelyn loved him. He had his answer. Now he needed to know exactly how deep Rossi's claws were dug into his empire. He entered the parlour. Evelyn was sitting gracefully on the velvet sofa, the steaming black ceramic mug resting on the mahogany coffee table in front of her. She looked up, her expression a perfect portrait of sympathetic concern. "There you are, darling," Evelyn cooed, patting the space next to her. "I made your favorite espresso, a double shot. You look so pale, Vincenzo. You need to drink something and rest. We will figure out this money situation together." Vincenzo sat heavily beside her. He looked at the coffee. The rich aroma masked the heavy metal that was meant to stop his heart. "You're right." Vincenzo sighed, rubbing his chest to feign the early symptoms of the poison she thought she had been feeding him all week. "My chest has been tight all day. My fingers, they feel numb." A flicker of dark triumph danced in Evelyn's sapphire eyes. "Drink, darling. It will warm you up." Vincenzo picked up the mug. He brought it to his lips, making sure Evelyn's eyes were fixed on him. Just as the liquid touched his bottom lip, he violently jerked his hand, feigning a sudden massive muscle spasm. The mug slipped from his grip, crashing onto the priceless Persian rug. The scalding, poisoned espresso soaked into the intricate woven wool. "Vincenzo!" Evelyn shrieked, jumping back to avoid the splash. Vincenzo grabbed his chest with both hands, letting out a choked, agonizing gasp. He slid off the velvet sofa, his knees hitting the marble floor. He contorted his face into a mask of pure agony, his breathing becoming shallow and erratic. "Evelyn," he wheezed, reaching a hand out toward her. "Help. Call." Evelyn stood over him. The sympathetic fiancée was gone. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't scream for the guards. She simply stood there, crossing her arms over her silk robe, watching him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing an insect in a jar. "It's okay, Vincenzo," she whispered, her voice chillingly calm. "Just let go. It's better this way. You were bankrupt anyway, right?" Vincenzo let his eyes roll back. He gave one final violent shudder and let his body go entirely limp on the floor. He slowed his breathing to a near imperceptible rhythm, a meditation trick he had learned years ago to slow bleeding from gunshot wounds. Silence descended on the parlour, broken only by the crackling of the fireplace. After a minute, Evelyn knelt beside him. She pressed two manicured fingers to his neck. Vincenzo kept his pulse as slow and steady as possible, mimicking the fading beats of a dying man. Satisfied, Evelyn stood up. She pulled the burner phone from her pocket and dialed. "Adrian," she said, a wicked, victorious laugh escaping her lips. "It's done. The king is dead. Bring your men and come claim your castle." It took exactly 20 minutes for the heavily armored matte black Mercedes G-Wagon to smash through the front wrought-iron gates of the Costa estate. Lying perfectly still on the rug, Vincenzo heard the heavy crunch of gravel, followed by the violent kicking open of the mansion's solid oak front doors. Heavy footsteps echoed through the grand foyer. "Where is he?" A rough, arrogant voice called out. "In here, baby," Evelyn called back from the parlour. Adrian Rossi swaggered into the room. He was a younger man, dressed in a flashy designer suit that cost more than most cars, his slicked-back hair shining under the chandeliers. Two heavily armed enforcers flanked him, their submachine guns drawn. Rossi looked down at Vincenzo's unmoving body and chuckled. He walked over and kicked Vincenzo sharply in the ribs. Vincenzo absorbed the blow without flinching, his mind cataloguing the debt. "Look at him," Rossi sneered, wrapping an arm around Evelyn's waist and pulling her in for a deep kiss. The great Vincenzo Costa, ruined by a bad portfolio and a beautiful woman. "You did perfectly, amore." "He was pathetic at the end," Evelyn said, resting her head on Rossi's chest. whining about starting over in Mexico. Now tell me about the biometric transfer. His laptop is in his study. My IT guy is already remote accessing the mainframe, Rossi said, pulling out a tablet. As his legal proxy, your voice print and fingerprint will authorize the release of the blind trust directly into my Cayman accounts. Once the money is moved, my boys here will roll Costa in a carpet, take him to the docks, and dump him in the Atlantic. By tomorrow morning, I'll be sitting at the head of the syndicate table. And me? Evelyn asked, tracing a finger down Rossi's lapel. You'll be my queen, Rossi promised. That's a touching fairy tale. A deep, chilling voice echoed from the floor. But you skipped the part where the dragon burns you both alive. Rossi froze. Evelyn gasped, stumbling backward, her hands flying to her mouth. Slowly, fluidly, Vincenzo Costa rose from the Persian rug. He dusted off his bespoke suit trousers, rolled his shoulders, and locked his piercing dark eyes on the intruders. There was no pain in his face, no weakness, only the terrifying predatory calm of an apex killer. Vincenzo, Evelyn whispered, her voice cracking with pure terror. How? You drank it. I spilled it, Evelyn. A tragic loss of a good roast, Vincenzo said, smoothly, stepping over the broken ceramic mug. He reached into his breast pocket and tossed the small glass vial onto the coffee table. It clinked sharply against the wood. Thallium. Very old school, Adrian. I expected better from the Moretti family. Rossi quickly recovered from his shock, his face twisting into a snarl. It doesn't matter, you're dead anyway. He snapped his fingers at his enforcers. Shoot him! Put him down! The two men raised their weapons. Click, click, click. The sound of dozens of assault rifles cocking echoed from the shadows of the parlor, the balcony above and the hallway behind them. Rossi spun around. The mansion, which he thought was empty, was suddenly crawling with heavily armed men wearing Costa tactical gear. They stepped out from behind marble pillars and velvet curtains, their laser sights painting Rossi and his men with glowing red dots. Did you really think I dismissed my guard? Vincenzo asked, walking slowly toward Rossi. I just told them to step out of sight. I control this house, Adrian. I control this city. And I control the data. Vincenzo pulled out his own phone and tapped the screen. Your mole in my IT department, Vincenzo continued. He's currently bleeding out in the trunk of a car at LaGuardia. The blind trust transfer. It wasn't waiting for a biometric release to go to my accounts. It was a honeypot. The moment your hacker tried to access it, my servers traced his location and wiped your entire syndicate's digital ledger. You're broke, Adrian. The Moretti family is bankrupt. Rossi's face drained of color. His bravado shattered in an instant, replaced by the crushing realization that he had walked blindly into a masterclass of deception. Vincenzo, please! Evelyn sobbed, falling to her knees, crawling toward him. Her beautiful face was stained with mascara tears. He made me do it. He threatened me. I love you. I passed the test. I didn't leave when you said you were broke. Vincenzo looked down at her, his expression entirely hollow. You didn't stay for me, Evelyn. You stayed for the biometric release. He looked up at his head of security. Take Rossi and his men to the Brooklyn warehouse, the one the feds supposedly raided. Let's see how well they swim in concrete shoes. No, Costa, wait! Rossi screamed as 4 massive guards grabbed him, dragging him, kicking and swearing out of the parlor. Vincenzo turned his cold gaze back to Evelyn. She was trembling violently on the floor. As for you, Vincenzo said softly, you love money so much. You can leave this house with exactly what you brought into it. Nothing. He signaled 2 guards. Strip her of the jewelry. Take the silk robe. Throw her out the front gates in her undergarments. If she ever sets foot in New York City again, shoot her. Evelyn's hysterical screams echoed off the high ceilings as she was dragged away, the sound eventually fading into the rainy night. Vincenzo stood alone in his grand parlor. The silence returned, but this time it didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. He walked down to the basement security room and knocked twice on the heavy steel door. A moment later, locks disengaged, and Beatrice peeked out her eyes wide with lingering fear. "It's over, Beatrice," Vincenzo said gently. "They're gone." Beatrice let out a massive sigh of relief, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "Come with me," Vincenzo said. He led the maid back up to his private study. He walked behind his massive oak desk, opened a safe, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He handed it to Beatrice. "What is this Mr. Costa?" she asked, her pudgy fingers hesitating to take it. "Inside is the deed to a 3-bedroom house in the Hamptons, fully paid for," Vincenzo explained. "There is also a private trust set up in your name, containing $5 million, and I have arranged for your mother to be transferred to the premier private wing at Mount Sinai, with round-the-clock specialized care for the rest of her life." Beatrice gasped, dropping the envelope onto the desk. "Mr. Costa, I can't take this. I'm just a maid." "You are not a maid anymore, Beatrice," Vincenzo said, his voice carrying absolute sincerity. "You are the woman who saved the Costa Empire. You saw what my highly paid security teams missed. You showed me loyalty when the woman in my bed showed me treason." Tears streamed down Beatrice's round cheeks. For her entire life, her size and her status had made her invisible. People looked right through her. But this man, this dangerous, powerful king of the underworld, truly saw her. "Thank you," she sobbed, clutching the envelope to her chest. "No, Beatrice," Vincenzo Costa said, pouring 2 glasses of exceptionally rare scotch. He handed one to the woman who had saved his life. "Thank you. Did you love this thrilling story of betrayal, mafia justice, and unlikely heroism? Sometimes the most invisible people hold the power to bring down empires. If Beatrice's incredible courage and Vincenzo's brilliant revenge kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, share this video with your friends who love a good plot twist, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more jaw-dropping, real-life drama stories. Drop a comment below. What would you have done